as you know, tonight's topic is the war in the Middle East, specifically Iran. This is a hot topic. We've worked really, really hard for now, Rob and I, for 7 years to make Politics in the Pub famous for amicability and for people coming along, being able to have a say and being treated rightly and with kindness. And we really, really want to hold on to that reputation, but we need your help for that. If you could please help us out, each one of these speakers, they're being very, very brave being here. So if you could please just keep in mind that we're here for a good time, a good night. You'll be doing Rob, I, and everybody involved a service. Can I count on you for that? Yes. Right, without any further ado, I'm going to welcome our MC. Please welcome Sam Wainwright. Sam is a long-term activist for human rights and social justice. He was formerly a councillor. Oh, speaking of which, I want to acknowledge Pip Slaughter, councillor for Fremantle. Are there any other councillors in the room?
Ex-councillor Rachel.
I want to welcome ex-councillor Rachel Pemberton. Okay, to wit. Formerly a councillor of the city of Fremantle for 12 years. What a run. Sam is now very active in the Stop AUKUS WA campaign group. For many years he worked as a wharfie before becoming a disability support worker. He lives in O'Connor with his partner, Janet. Please welcome Sam Wainwright.
Thanks very much, Christian, and thanks for the opportunity. I think it's the first time I've been the MC at this event, and it's going to be a bit of a struggle for me to resist the temptation to editorialise too much as the chair, given it's a topic I'm very passionate about, the many questions that will be discussed. So, in fact, I literally just came from an event outside the Perth Exhibition and Conference Centre. There's a thing called the Indian Ocean Defence and Security Conference, which is, it's about selling weapons and developing the arms industry. So I was there very much with a purpose. In fact, I was an MC there. I literally raced down, and I was not the impartial MC at that event. But I've deliberately put a shirt over the top of my Stop AUKUS t-shirt to remind myself to play the role of impartial MC and not partisan in the debate. So I'll do that. That's my sort of part of, I'll uphold my part of the bargain as Christian has said to you. Politics in the Pub has tried to develop the reputation of being a place where you can have serious debate, real debate, but respectfully so. So now I don't think Christian's going to rap you over the knuckles if you chuckle or laugh or clap or anything like that, but obviously you know what I mean. Sustained interruption, personal abuse, that sort of stuff. None of that caper. Respectfully, let people have their say, and then we'll return the favour to you and you can have your say when we come round. Anyway, I'll talk about more how we run discussion when we get to discussion. Obviously we're going to move into our speakers now, and I'll introduce them in turn as I invite them up to the microphone, but they will be in order: Joe, Fraser, Nasrin, and Rob. So we'll go to Joe first. Now, Joe, I'll read out the introduction I've got here first, and then I'll say a little bit more. I'll say a little bit more about Joe. Joe has been a peace activist for many years, and the nuclear question is what initially grabbed her attention. People would know that Joe's been down at the Fremantle docks many times, along with social justice and environmental issues. Now my printer faded here, she was, well, I know she was elected 3 times to the Senate in 1984, 1987 and 1990. And throughout her activist career, she's attempted to uphold the Quaker tradition of peace and non-violence. But before we do hear from Joe, I think it's a special day, is it not? Yeah. Yes? Soon, it's a special day. I think someone's going to sing a song. Okay.
We're all going to sing it. I'm sure you know it, but because I'm a jazz singer, we're not just going to sing it, we're going to swing it as well. I'm going to do our best to sing it in tune. So, ba 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 ba, about like that. 1, 2, 1, 2. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joe. Happy birthday to you. Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Happy birthday.
All right, as I said, Joe will be our first speaker. Each of our speakers will have 6 minutes. When the 6 minutes has elapsed, there may be a gong or a bell rung by Christian. Now, Christian, he'll allow speakers, both and you when it comes your turn as well, to finish your sentence. You'll be able to wrap up. But don't take a piss. So when you hear the bell, that means conclude your sentence in an orderly manner. Okay. So first to Joe. Thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for happy birthday. I mean, really, I've had quite a few of them by now. Yes, 80. So, I first of all also want to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people who looked after this land so well before settlers, colonialists came and managed to stuff it all up very quickly and, I'm sorry to say, very efficiently, but I do think that the generosity we've been shown by the Indigenous people is really remarkable. We should all be tossed out in our ears, actually, but we're not, so here we are. We've got to make the most of it, and I'm very grateful, and big respect to any Indigenous people who are here tonight. I want you to think back to a bit over a year ago. You remember we had a federal election in May last year? And think back to how you were feeling then. I think a lot of people were very relieved that Dutton was not going to be Prime Minister, but he also lost his seat. That was quite good, wasn't it? But I want you to think about whether, in the years since, your impression of the government as doing a good job is intact or not. So raise your hand if you think the government's been doing a good job for the last year.
Better since the budget.
Better since the budget, okay, that's good. Just a couple, only 2 or 3 people, oh my goodness. Well, I think that we have lost a lot of trust in our government over the last year because they have been behaving rather foolishly. Since February the 28th, when Trump and Netanyahu decided to bomb Iran, Albo boasted that he was the first international leader to support that war. It was shameful, absolutely shameful. No thought at all went into that. But I do want to tell you that before that, I mean, of course, this was on the back of the war against the Palestinians, Syria, and Lebanon. But before that, on the day before, there was a cable that came from Austria in Vienna to Canberra. Probably nobody here has ever heard of Ian Biggs. I hadn't either until I started looking into this, but he's a diplomat for Australia who has worked in Syria, in Iran, in Turkey, and in Saudi Arabia. So he kind of knows the area reasonably well, I would think. He sent a cable to Canberra, which should have been read by the Prime Minister, saying, actually, going to war against Iran over the possibility that Iran might have nuclear weapons is not such a good idea. Not a good idea. Now, that came out under Freedom of Information. If you haven't heard of Deep Cut, it's a really good news, alternative news website. A lot of it was redacted, of course. Anything that comes out under Freedom of Information is often so heavily redacted you can't really make any sense of it. But the sense of it was clear. This is not a good idea. And we've been there before. Exactly the same as the Iraq War, when that was based on the lie that Iraq was about to launch into nuclear weapon status. Not true then, not true now. And it was just shameful, this rush to war. You know, I felt really, really upset about that, as I'm sure a lot of people here would have too. Now, Kenny Wong kept on talking about the rules-based order, international rules-based order. You haven't heard her use that phrase so much in the last few weeks because clearly it's gone. Clearly it's gone. But we are still supporting Israel's right to protect itself, to defend itself. And Israel is still a friend of ours because it's a friend of the United States. It's an ally of the United States. It's not actually an official status for us, but any criticism of Israel, you would note, would have been extremely muted and really only came about with the flotilla that was interrupted in international waters by the Israeli military, and because there are Australians on board. Well, what about all the people who have been suffering all this time in Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Iran? Or 4 war fronts that Israel is managing or trying to manage at the moment. Finally, the Israeli ambassador was called in, but it was very selective and very subdued criticism. It's not good enough. It's just not good enough. Now, Richard Marles was almost salivating, waiting for an invitation, as though it was a great party to join. Where was the invitation for us to join the war? And he would have said yes immediately if Trump had actually issued that invitation. But never worry about being left out of the party. The United Arab Emirates invited Australia. They said, oh, we're at risk here, you're a friend of ours, send us some help. So off we sent an E-7A wedge-tail spy plane, which actually just helps Pine Gap do its job. All that spying, all that collecting of information that helps the Israelis target exactly who they want to take out. There are 85 ADF personnel there. It reminds me a little bit of Vietnam. Start with some advisors, just a little bit here and a little bit there, and then suddenly you're into more. So if this stupid war, they're all stupid, but this one's particularly stupid, if this continues, we are likely to be further involved, because that's what we do. We support the Americans whatever they want. Now, you'll be hearing more about the economic impacts later, but the Straits of Hormuz not being open, of course, has an impact on everybody everywhere. This is a global situation. I just want to mention very quickly, Clinton Fernandez wrote a book called Turbulence. He's a former intelligence officer from the ADF, so he knows what he's talking about. And he says that Australia clings on wanting to be a buddy to the US. It's grovelling subservience to the seduction. They're my words, but his words were that we have to continue to demonstrate relevance to the Americans, continue to demonstrate our relevance. So we hand money over, hand over fist for the AUKUS submarines, which will probably never arrive. Oh dear, it's terrible. And what do we get? We get draconian laws to shut down protesters in this country. That's what we're experiencing all around the country. IPAN is an amazing organisation, the Independent Peaceful Australia Network, that is holding its conference right at the same time that the Labor Party is holding its conference in Adelaide, and its theme is Time to Break Free. Yes. We have been calling for getting out of AUKUS, getting out of the forced posture review, which gives the American military unfettered access to designated military establishments in this country. We are absolutely further sucked in more than we ever have been before. We need to take the whole alliance for a massive inquiry. I think it was that very old Greek philosopher Socrates who said, an unexamined life is not worth living. Well, I would say an unexamined alliance is not worth having.
Oh, I suppose you're allowed a little bit of extra time when you've got a zero after your birthday. Well, our next respondent to this question is Fraser Maywood. I last met Fraser. I think that's my burger and it can go there. I was dropping off to his house some giant sort of prop wind turbines. I'm sure we were protesting outside Woodside or something like that. Anyway, Fraser spent 45 years in the international oil and gas, mining and power industries before pivoting to the clean energy transition. He's a chair for the not-for-profit Sustainable Energy Now and treasurer at the newly formed not-for-profit Electrify Everything WA. Over to you, Fraser.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks, Joe, for that rousing speech. Very hard act to follow. So my talk is going to be about energy security. So just to be clear to start with, we don't actually have an energy crisis, we have a fossil fuel crisis. And hopefully this will be the last major one that has a significant worldwide impact as we transition to domestically produced green energy and we electrify our homes, transport and industry. As we can see, China is doing this at scale and speed, and so should we. So the cheaper home battery scheme, which you're probably familiar with, whilst imperfect, shows what can be achieved when bold vision is enacted. So much has been said recently in the right-wing media, wrong as it turns out, about Australia's potential oil reserves and government policy towards the industry and the business decision on the success of governments for private enterprises to actually close our oil refineries. The truth is, we've actually developed the bulk of our oil reserves, not our gas reserves, but the bulk of our oil reserves. And what little remains would have no significant impact in our energy security. So we consume around 170 million litres of liquid fuel per day. That's an enormous amount, which is 90% of which is imported. So just about a background fact, 60% of that's diesel, 25% of that is jet fuel, and 50% is, 25% petrol and 15% jet fuel. And in terms of which sectors use that, road transport is 53%, mining is 14%, aviation is 15%, and agriculture is only 4%. So, and the balance of that is for power generation. We are actually the world's #1 diesel importer. Unbelievable from a country of 23 or so million. And in terms of reserves, Geoscience Australia puts our proven and probable reserves at 230 million barrels. And when you equate that, that's only 7 months of supply, versus our demand. So it's not a material. So putting it simply, importing crude oil and refining here would have no material impact on our energy security versus importing our refined products from Southeast Asia, who supply 96% of our needs. So our refineries were closed largely because the much larger Asian refineries are more cost effective and they can deliver cheaper fuel to us than we could produce it ourselves. So the idea of propping up a mature industry like the oil and gas industry by investing in refineries makes no economic or energy security sense. And policy support should be targeted at renewables and electrification for energy security and lowering energy prices, without forgetting renters, low-income earners and those in social housing. You may have heard the phrase, drill baby drill. It's a slogan harkening back to former times. It's not an energy policy based on any logic. That's not to say it doesn't have its supporters. So what to do? Well, short of ending Trump's illegal war of choice in the Middle East, what to do? So we have a short-term problem in terms of liquid fuel securities, and the state and federal governments, whether you like them or not, are actually doing what's needed, and you can see that impact on the Bowser. So high prices and energy security concerns are driving people's behaviour towards public transport, cycling, e-bikes, EVs, and very encouragingly, the electrification of heavy trucks and buses. Either that occurs as a new replacement or they're retrofitted when diesel engines are due for replacement. And that trend is starting and it will happen very rapidly. So it turns out, interestingly enough, that shortage of supply is so psychologically scarring that induces people to make long delayed investments that result in permanent changes to their consumption habits. And unlike toilet paper, we have practical alternatives to fossil fuels. One area would be the ending of the diesel fuel rebate, and that would accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels. And that's a very hot topic at the moment. especially for the likes of the big miners. So as not to disadvantage farmers and impact food prices, that policy could look at Twiggy's suggestion of a $50 million annual cap on the amount of tax credits a company can claim. So there is scope for action there, and I think it would be very popular. So more renewable energy like wind, solar and battery storage would significantly reduce the amount of diesel used for power generation, improve energy security and put downward pressure on fuel prices. Low-cost rooftop solar and battery storage is ideally suited for charging of all forms of electric transport. We could look at modest amounts of domestically produced biodiesel that would reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels. Right, I'll take a leaf out of Joe's book. Okay, so in summary, then I'll go for that 10 minutes. We are at the beginning of the fossil fuel death spiral, and the industry will do everything it possibly can to stay relevant and profitable. This includes continuing to propagate misinformation and disinformation and destabilize social cohesion. Domestic renewable energy and electrification will deliver energy security, lower prices, and reduce our emissions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fraser. Well, that's poses the question, doesn't it? Can we turn crisis into opportunity? Are we good enough to turn crisis into opportunity? Now, I don't think I'm misjudging the room when I say there's a lot of people here who are opposed to this current war, some for very profound reasons. Opinion polls suggest that 80% of Australians are actually opposed to this current war, although I would hazard a guess that a good percentage of them is simply because of the effect of the Bowser. But in that context, we should also not lose sight of the fact that the Iranian people are subjects and also have a right to determine their own future, and not just be bargained over. And so that is an important element to inject into our conversation tonight. So we're going to hear an Iranian voice tonight, and that is Nasrin Marmarchi. I hope I got that right, I think. Nasrin is a Perth-based Iranian community member who, after years of avoiding politics and living like an ordinary software engineer, business founder, support worker, and community organiser, like an ordinary, that sounds like a lot of work to be doing. Sounds like you're very busy. Felt compelled to change. She chose to engage in politics and take action following the 2022 uprising and mass killing in Iran. Since then, she has focused on practical advocacy, from writing to politicians and using freedom of information applications against the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps terror, to make parliamentary submissions and organising local protests for internet freedom in Iran and more. Nasrin is always on the project of working towards freedom in Iran. Nasrin.
I acknowledge and pay my respect to Wajak Noongar people, whose land is our safe place tonight to meet. And I acknowledge and thank you for your time and open hearts and minds. Have you ever felt afraid, frustrated, and confused by the current state of the world? You're not alone. We are looking at a crisis that is happening right in the world's most critical energy supply region. A conflict that involves Israel, the United States, and the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. And the role that Ukraine is playing for Europe, Iranian people are playing for the world, fighting against the Islamic regime. But to learn anything from this crisis, we need to really understand two hidden and important dimensions of this crisis: time and space. First, time. This crisis didn't begin recently. It began actually in 1979 revolution in Iran, when it brought power to a dark alliance between hard left and Shia ideology with an apocalyptic vision. Their worldview requires elimination of Israel, followed by global chaos and bloodshed, until their 12th Imam, messianic person, actually appears after 1,000 years and fix everything. So they're playing an infinite game, and every lost life and destruction is not a setback for them. It's a milestone that draws them closer to their vision. Second dimension, space. This crisis is not bound by any border. The Islamic regime actually conducted 157 foreign operations before the war, excluding the war, with the help of organized crime organizations in the world, and at least 2 of them happened in Australia. Consider the name of their official military arm, IRGC, Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, and notice that the word Iran isn't even in it. So, IRGC exists to export the Islamic Revolution to the rest of the world. You're welcome. So how does this affect us here and now? Imagine Australia as a magnificent garden. We here love gardening, aren't we? And this garden of ours is facing 2 very different threats at the moment. The first one is like an angry, scary gorilla. It's really loud, scary, visible, stomping our flowers, breaking off the branches of our trees, and it gets a lot of attention. This threat is the energy crisis and the soaring cost of living. But the second and way more important and dangerous threat is thousands of tiny termites. They are eating away the roots of our trees. These termites are the extremist Shia ideology that are not slowly anymore actually, rapidly infiltrating West. But they've been for decades hollowing out Iran. Now I'm saying that as an Iranian. So you may want to negotiate with an angry gorilla, hoping that temporarily it can calm down, but negotiate with tiny termites. Good luck with that. Now, shall we? This may bring tears to my eyes, so forgive me. I hope not, but shall we look at the human cost of this regime? Just recently, more than 43,000 people were killed by the Islamic regime. People like 12-year-old Sana, who drew her last breath in her mom's arms, or grandmothers who stood as a human shield to protect young protesters, or young specialists like Irfan, who was a satellite tech specialist, was hanged. Hassan was a father of 2. He was tortured to death for simply having a Starlink dish to access internet. Right now, the rate of execution is frightening. After 88 days of total internet blackout, the Islamic regime, with the help of China, is turning Iran's internet to a completely closed intranet to block the access to outside world for people and just let specific people, supporters of the regime, to connect to the outside world. And all of this has resulted in suicide rate skyrocketing in Iran. It's okay to leave here tonight feeling still afraid, frustrated, and confused. But it's not okay to stay frozen. Wise fear and frustration are beginning of courage and action, like what happened in Iran. Confusion is the beginning of problem solving, and we all know the permanent and real solution is the total end of this Islamic regime. So let's get comfortable with all these uncomfortable feelings and invest them in 4 practical and safe solutions right now. One, provide satellite internet for Iran. Please ask me why and how in Q&A. Number two, involve Iranians and collaborate with them to protect Australia. Number three, starve the gorilla. Sanction and freeze all the cryptocurrency wallets of IRGC. They do have a lot around the world. And number four, block the termites. Ban all the regime-backed events and activities in this country. Just look at their flag. It's easy to recognize them. If you see this logo on any flag, stay away from it. This is the Islamic regime logo. The real flag of Iran is the lion and sun that I'm proudly wearing now. The great poet Rumi once wrote about the game that frustration, fear, and confusion play in our minds. Let's play full on with this. I have the English translation for anyone interested, but I'm going to sing it in Persian for you now. امروز عقل من ز من یک بارگی بیزار شد خواهد که ترساند مرا پنداشت من نادیدم من خود کجا ترسم از او شکلی بکردم بهر او من هیچ کی باشم ولی قاصد چنین گیجیدم. Keep Australia safe by helping Iran. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nasrin. Now we'll go to our fourth and final speaker, and that's Rob Dells. Rob is normally at the microphone here as MC, so it's now he's the one that's going to let rip with his personal views on the topic. So Rob is a co-lead of the Fremantle Network and Politics in the Pub. He started his career as an English teacher, preparing future prime ministers at the prestigious Harrow School in London, where he swiftly realised that the ruling class and their educators don't know it all. Moving to Australia, he then worked at South Fremantle High and now Fremantle College, where he met other Fremantle Network co-lead, Christian Maori. Though somehow the two managed to put off affectionately causing trouble for one another until many years later. He's an avid Greens door knocker and member of the Extinction Rebellion group, Grandparents for Climate Change. Over to you, Rob.
Did I actually write all that stuff, Sam?
You did, so it must be true.
Greenwashing is alive and well. The lesson that I want to draw from the US and Israeli attacks on Iran and Lebanon is proof, yet again, if we ever need it, that war solves nothing and war is to be avoided at all costs. I'd like to briefly explain 6 reasons why I think this is true, but I mainly want to share 3 experiences of my life that have led to that conclusion. So the most obvious is that war involves slaughter, maiming, killing, death, and increasingly that involves civilians and children. This war has killed about 3,600 Iranians, injured about 25,000. Israel's war against Lebanon, 2,200 deaths and about 7,500 injuries, according to Amnesty. If that is just enough, I think, to declare that war is the greatest evil of all. If you want to read this, you're very welcome. You'll see that I'm not madly original. But the second is the destruction of the culture, the buildings, the homes, and the natural environment. That would include the enormous greenhouse gases emitted by the war machine. The third is the immense cost. Essentially, the huge defence budgets are a theft from budgets for the things we need to create a decent society.
Absolutely.
The fourth is that whenever a war starts, you know it's going to be goodbye truth, welcome lies, and we know that any understanding of nuance or ambiguity is going to be replaced by simple-minded hatred of enemies. Thanks. One very disturbing aspect of this distortion of truth is that we have what are called worthy and unworthy victims. We are made to feel immense sympathy for some victims, but others we are persuaded don't give a shit, basically. The fifth one is that the combatants, the soldiers, too often return as physically and emotionally damaged people. It's interesting that the conflict, the long conflict in Afghanistan seemed to have a very high number of Australian soldiers who were really deeply emotionally disturbed by that. The final reason is that democracy is destroyed when you have a country like the United States which is committed or addicted to war. The military have excessive power over all the decision making. Military budgets become sacrosanct and other budgets can be forfeited. Anyone who disagrees with this is persecuted, and a classic example of that is Julian Assange. I'd like to share three experiences that have really led my life to believe these things, that war is the greatest evil. And the first one is being born. Of course, you have to start somewhere. But I was born to parents who'd lived through 2 world wars, and in 1945 they joined with millions of others saying, never again. We are not going to solve our problems by resorting to war. One of their greatest achievements was the United Nations, and its absolutely soaring and moving introduction. We, the peoples of the UN, determined to save generations from the scourge of war, agree that all members shall refrain from threat or use of force against other states. At the family level, this commitment to never again violence and war, my parents just preached at us the whole time, you don't solve your problems by fighting, you don't solve your problems by violence, you must solve your problems by peaceful negotiation and preventing fights. They told us up front, we are totally committed never to using violence against you, we will never hit you, we will never strap you. And they lived up to that, and I am bloody grateful. My second experience was the Vietnam War. Once again, its greatest evil was the killing, the murder, the mass slaughter. Some people claim that 3 million Vietnamese died. The figure is certainly more than 2 million. And of course, our government made sure that there was no grieving by Australians for that immense loss. But the thing that I took from the Vietnam War, which was really disturbing to me because I grew up as a Menzies lover, I would have voted for him when I got to 21, but lies upon lies upon lies were told to us, and it was hard for me to accept because I thought it was a good government. These lies multiplied when we got to conscription, and they just kept telling us more and more lies. Starting with the foundation lie, Bob Menzies, solid commitment. These conscripts will never go to Vietnam. And of course we all know where that promise went. My final story is Zimbabwe. In 1986, my partner Valerie and I went to work for 3 years at a remote corner of Zimbabwe. And this was 6 years after the end of the 16-year war, which was fought by black Zimbabweans to overthrow the racist settler government that wasn't going to budge. I can't think of any war that you would say was more just, where justice was on their side. And yet even there, it had enormous, negative, horrible consequences. The most obvious was the damaged men who'd spent 16 years in the bush killing or being killed, and they could not settle into civilian life. They caused enormous trouble, they were violent, they were unemployed, and eventually Mugabe said to them, I'm getting a bit unpopular here, how about you become my thugs to persuade voters to vote for me? And a few years later he said, do what you do best, boys, go and kill some white farmers and take over the white farms. Now there's probably many reasons why Zimbabwe declined from a hopeful promise to a failed state, but most people in Zimbabwe agree that the boys from the bush and the damage that was done to them during the war was a huge factor. I rest my case that war is the greatest evil of all.
Well, Joe, Fraser, Nasrin, and Rob, thank you for some thought-provoking contributions. Now's the time for you to go and recharge your glass, visit the little room if you need to, and we'll be back here in 10 minutes' time for your contribution. Okay, see you soon.